Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and it is so good to have you here. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about the state budget, the state sales tax holiday, and the child tax credit with Assemblyman Hal Wirtz, who is standing by. He's on the Assembly Budget Committee. First, though, we have New Jersey's new gun control laws. Governor Phil Murphy signed 7 new bills into a law aimed at curtailing gun violence. The legislation allows New Jersey's Attorney General to pursue lawsuits against the firearm industry. Murphy signed the bills in Metuchen in the wake of the fatal Independence Day shooting in Illinois, as well as recent mass shootings in New York and Texas. Joining us now to discuss the event and the bills is the Mayor of Metuchen, Jonathan Bush. Mayor, welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Laura.
Well, recently, Governor Phil Murphy was in Metuchen to sign the package of 7 gun safety reform bills. So first, why did he choose your town? Why Metuchen for the signing?
It's about finishing where he started. You know, the package, the most recent version of the package was announced in Metuchen in late November. And so the idea of coming back to Borough Hall, where he first announced it, I think was important to him and to the governor's office to be able to show that they made a full circle here and were able to come back to where they began.
So as a mayor, do you think the state is taking appropriate action?
It's hard to know exactly where things can be pushed any further at the state level. But I'll just say that, our community has always been very, very engaged in some of the social action issues around the country. And, we have a very active youth organizations in the high school, for example. I know a lot of towns had this, but, our youth a couple of years ago after Parkland walked from the high school to Borough Hall, which is why it made it so special that Governor Murphy in the first place announced this package in November and then came back, obviously, last week to finalize things. I would say that we could always do more to protect each other from the impacts of gun violence. But I think most people in Metuchen and elsewhere agree and believe in the Second Amendment. But there's a real firm understanding and concept around here that there's still more that can be done, and that while this is a right, it's one that has to be regulated.
Have other constituents reached out to you to talk about gun violence, especially after the recent mass shootings in Texas, where 19 students, elementary school students, 2 teachers were killed, and at a grocery store in Buffalo where 10 people were killed?
Yeah, I mean, the events in Chicago and Uvalde, they weigh heavily. And again, when you live in Metuchen, it's sort of an understanding that you can be more active than just the local pothole issues and, paving our streets and making sure that our downtown is thriving. Those are very important to Metuchenites. But we also have a very strong position, again, like on a number of social action issues. There was a huge number of rallies after the George Floyd dynamic and support of Black Lives Matter. We had some very concerning immigration issues right here in Metuchen that brought some concern to and highlight to the immigration issue. And so we've had a number of rallies attended by high hundreds number of people around town. We have a Martin Luther King Park where we've been having a number of our rallies, including the area in front of Borough Hall. So social action in Metuchen is something that is not a stranger. And I think in the gun control concept, especially as after Parkland and after Uvalde, after Chicago, even after the Pittsburgh shooting a couple of years ago at the synagogue, we ended up with a rally. The governor came to that as well, actually. And so we've been very engaged in these issues, and we hope that the state has begun to recognize that, and maybe people start to listen to what people around here have to say.
Let's talk about some other local issues in Metuchen. Now, in November, Metuchen voters are going to be able to decide on a $70 million bond referendum for improvements to borough schools. And that would include full-day kindergarten. So let's talk a little bit about some of the improvements the schools are looking to make with this money. Most districts, don't they have full-day kindergarten?
So I wouldn't say most. In fact, in my other job, when I'm not mayor, I'm a school district lawyer. I represent 70 districts around the state. So I have some familiarity with the way that these dynamics work. It's not across the board. Some school districts have it, others don't. Metuchen has never had it. And so I think the school district, and I got to be very clear about this, the school district is a separate, obviously, entity than the municipality. Yeah. We tend to bring them together like a lot of states have, and their towns run closer together. There's a firm wall between the two organizations in New Jersey, and that's designed by statute intentionally. But I will say that that the idea here in Metuchen is that this is a more than just the question of whether there should be full day kindergarten. I think there's a general concern among residents that I've heard, and I know the school district has heard, which is why they're trying to respond, that there's a cry for more services that the district in its current form is unable to provide. So full day kindergarten is one of them. The possibility of accounting for, more kids per classroom and making sure that there are more teachers.
People are always concerned about, if you expand, will it mean that it takes away other services or put an unfair burden back on the taxpayer? Are you having those conversations? Are you hearing about those conversations if people are concerned about whether it's special services or for their gifted and talented program, honors program, what have you? Is that the issue, or is it more another tax?
I think it's something different for everyone. And we've seen this, and we see this across the state where people vote with, we see this across the country, and you look at exit polls, and it's amazing to see why people think the way they do and how their basis for support of the same candidate, for example, could be completely different, or the reason they voted for a question or against a question is divergent. But the school district has in Metuchen has had a very strong record of passing referenda in the past. I mean, most recently, a couple of years ago, my wife and I publicly endorsed a referendum that would provide more money and services for social emotional issues in the school district. I know there's been a huge amount of need for the district to be able to support more kids with the changing dynamics that we have. Obviously, with kids growing up today are very different than when you and I, Laura, grew up. And to support those kids, the district, because of our size, needed to go out to referendum. And so, for that one, it was a very clear question. It wasn't a huge dollar number, but it made sense. And it was a legal requirement that they go out to referendum, as opposed to other districts with their size being maybe a little larger, would not have had to do that. So we would support that. With respect to the question right now before the voters, the questions, I say all three questions, it's something that I think we need to be a little bit more attentive to at least in carefully assessing and reviewing what those questions are and what we should do. I would never want to tell a voter what they should do on this question. I think it's a very personal decision. Again, to answer your question, I think most of the voters are concerned about their tax dollars going up. Many voters, maybe more, higher percentage, I would guess, in Metuchen, are concerned about the education of not just their own children or their own grandchildren, but their neighbors. We aren't called the Brainy Borough for nothing. That's our nickname that we were given almost 100 years ago.
What was it? What was the nickname again?
The Brainy Borough. We are the Brainy Borough.
The Brainy Borough. Okay, the Brainy Borough.
In a newspaper contest in about 100 years ago, we were given that title, and we take it seriously. We take it seriously. So I think there's a real feeling that if we can improve our schools, we can improve our community. But again, it's a very personal decision for each of the voters here. And I just don't know how it's going to turn out.
So moving to another topic, the borough is also you're looking to build an emergency services center to house both fire and EMS. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So this is something that we've been looking to do for a really long time. This is in many ways, I'm sure other mayors and other local officials will share this frustration that we have. Some of these decisions that seem so simple to the average person in a community are some of the most complicated that you'll ever face in any leadership capacity. So for example, with respect to the firehouse and EMS building, which we're going to call the Emergency Services Center, just to not choose sides, if you will, the issue that I found when I first took office, and I took office midterm. I mean, I came in to replace a former mayor who became the governor's chief of staff in December of 2017. And so in coming into this role, as a resident, I had concerns. When are we building this new firehouse? When are we building a new EMS building? And the biggest issue that I found is we could not get to the planning phase of this until we were able to find the space for this. And while that may be simple, you should build it here, you should build it there, there's this concept of private property that obviously we all regard very highly and should in our communities. But the other concept is that, if you are going to build something in a place of something else, there are potentially rising cost issue. If it's a lot that's not big enough, potentially it means that you have to add a floor to whatever it is that you're trying to do to build capacity. So it becomes a real chicken or the egg issue. It's how much space do you need in terms of a property, or how much space do you need in the building? And those change the cost that, the costs can double in the millions and get to, you can spend as much as, $30 million on a new firehouse, more, I'm sure, in a larger community. But we got to keep the cost down. We got to be mindful of the taxpayers. So we've been finally chose a site, and when you choose a site, it allows us to really start to narrow in and trying to keep a budget here as well. And we've had great working relationships at this point with the both the EMS officials and the fire officials, and we want to keep that going. So we're hoping to get that done and finalize things really in the next couple of months.
A lot going on in Metuchen. Any other initiatives that you're working on this year you'd like to talk about before we close it out here?
Yeah, we continue to work in our arts district. The borough a couple of years ago purchased the Forum Theater, which is an old vaudeville theater right on Main Street as you drive in from Route 1. So we're hoping to, help establish an arts district. We've got an incredible community of artists in Metuchen, which is, obviously a proud point for us. So we're going to continue to work on that. We continue to put huge investment in our downtown, which is the center point of our community, with the 7th highest ridership on our New Jersey Transit station and the entire Northeast Corridor. So that's we're going to continue to work on that. And we've done a good job with our Downtown Alliance and making sure that we attract people with all kinds of events and support for our businesses. And then, maybe one of the bigger projects we've had, we're doing a pilot, our first ever pilot, which we just adopted a couple of months ago. The design is to bring together government, sort of a public-private partnership with an entity that's coming in here to build an apartment building. But in the process of getting that, they've also required to clean up a $10 million, polluted site that had been a battery factory for approximately 100 years ago. So that site's being cleaned up. It's being turned into a 30-acre wildlife preserve with the help of Middlesex County. And it's going to be a great place to live. We're also, the pilot monies will help us pay for things like improvements to the library. We're going to help pay for the emergency services center. We're going to give some of the money to schools because it's obviously responsible to the extent that you add kids to your district to be able to help pay for them. So we're trying to do a lot around here, and in the process, maybe serve as a model for other communities. But do this because Metuchen is a really great, livable, wonderful place. And we hope that you and others watching this might visit one day.
Oh, I enjoy all of the restaurants, certainly. And yeah, when you're talking about the apartments coming in, that does go to what you were alluding to about, projects are more than what, they're not as easy as they seem, especially if you have an apartment complex coming in, which is great. You cleaning up an area, but that also means more people, and then can you provide for that? So yes, a lot going on.
A lot going on, and you always hear about people complaining about the additional housing. It's always been an issue. Didn't start in 2022, but it's something that we hear about a lot. And so the idea of having a public benefit to the extent that this is going to happen, because the other option is, and this is another issue that a lot of mayors are facing across New Jersey, the other value for developers these days, besides apartments, is corporate warehousing and distribution warehousing. And so to the extent that you are going to choose between new neighbors and 24 hours of tractor trailer truck traffic coming through town, the choice for me is easy.
And just one final thing, the apartment, is that affordable housing?
In Metuchen, we've done a great job on the affordable housing front. We have made it this for a very long time. We've had 15%, every development that goes in, 15% of the development is affordable.
A lot of towns have a lot of trouble with that because they are small, and they are concerned that there is enough to be able to support the schools, there's enough to be able to support the students at what cost. So, but thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Great. Laura, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Now we are turning our attention to the New Jersey state budget, the sales tax holiday, and child tax credit. Joining us now is Republican Assemblyman Hal Wirtz, who represents New Jersey's 24th legislative district, which covers parts of Morris, Warren, and Sussex County. He also sits on the Assembly Budget and Joint Budget Committee. Assemblyman, welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, as you know, lawmakers recently passed the state's budget, the largest ever, over $50.6 billion. Now, as somebody who is involved in the budget oversight and in the minority part, how would you say the budget was handled this year? Just your overall impression.
I'm the budget officer for the minority party for the Republicans. So, the budget is my full-time job on representing the Republican party, basically. No, look, it was good up till the end. I think that the transparency, which everyone always has an issue with, we were voting on bills and that weren't even seen yet in the budget. Actually, I live 2 hours from Trenton. The budget was actually posted online for the media and for the constituents of the state of New Jersey to see after it was voted on. So that was a little disappointing to say the least. $50 billion in spending. So it was just way too much spending for me, and way too much taxes. Governor Murphy has increased taxes about $5 billion, over 60 new taxes and fees. And, so when the Democrats have said we've taken too much of your money, that they've taken too much of your money. And we had over $8 billion in additional revenue that the state didn't even forecast.
New Jersey is under constitutional obligation. They have to have a balanced budget by June 30th. So a lot of things are happening at the last minute, and people are pushing things into bills that you may not know are happening. So, and one of the things you're talking about are earmarks in the budget. So first, can you explain what an earmark is and how it works in the budget?
Yeah, I mean, earmarks are like, sausage. Everybody enjoys it, but you don't want to see it being made. The Democrats have put in over $600 million. I'm not sure Republicans got any of Christmas trees, are called, and they're inserted late in the budget process, usually in bargaining back and forth. And a lot of people refer to it as pork, but this year there was an extraordinary amount, over $600 million. Just for your viewers, put it in perspective, the last budget under Governor Christie 5 years ago was $34 billion. We spent almost $51 billion the other day. That's a 46% increase in spending, which is absurd. Very few of your viewers or businesses seen that kind of spending or would ever be able to, and a 9% increase year over year. So this was a chance for us to make a real fundamental change and really have real tax reform. And, I think my friends on the other side of the aisle and the governor blew it.
Can you give us kind of an overall, we've got over $50 billion budget. What was the rest of the money going to?
Well, I mean, I think we have the Transportation Trust Fund, which is separate now, and it goes to improvements, but a lot of it goes to the operation of state government and tons of different programs, state programs throughout the state of New Jersey. And school funding, was a big hunk of it. Unfortunately, school funding wasn't fully funded, which is one of the things that the Republicans introduced, a 4-point plan that would have had real tax reform. One of the things was to fund schools to their full amount this year, since you had that amount of surplus. So it goes through the operation, but it's mainly many programs. I mean, I've gone head to head with this administration and publicly. There's a lot of things in there that really, I think, irks a lot of people. I mean, funding of illegal immigrants, funding their education, funding all types of health care. To the dismay of a lot of people, I don't even know what, where getting stimulus checks because they weren't included in the federal stimulus because they weren't citizens. So there's a lot of waste in addition. I mean, just to bring a budget from $34 billion to $51 billion, there's a lot of unnecessary spending in there. And to brag that you're giving money back, and I really had it out with my colleagues in a few of the budget hearings, that's our money, the taxpayers' money. It's not their money they're giving back. They're giving back money that they've overtaxed and taken from the citizens of New Jersey who are struggling. And I know we're going to get to some of the issues on the give backs, but they're mere gimmicks too on the periods when they're giving them back. I mean, that anchor program, I don't know whoever named that, but it's like I think this budget is like a boat anchor on around people's neck. The program doesn't take effect. God, Lord, till May.
That's all right. Yeah, let me stop you there, because the governor did announce that anchor program. So the anchor program, it stands for our viewers, for Affordable New Jersey Communities for Homeowners and Renters Property Tax Relief Program. It's a mouthful.
Yes.
So anchor program. So it's about $2 billion in tax relief from the state's surplus. So Governor Murphy's plan, households with incomes under $150,000 would receive about $1,500 in direct property tax relief. Households with incomes between $150,000 and $250,000 would receive $1,000. Renters would receive $450. And, we do have some of the highest property taxes in the nation. So you're saying this is not real relief, even though it is giving property taxpayers money back.
It's real relief, but it should be given out now. I mean, I think it's like an election budget. Look, there's no question, and I'm not being partisan, the Democrats are in trouble nationwide. And right now we're suffering from high gas prices. We're suffering from the highest inflation in 40 years. Why are we waiting till May of 2023 to return this money? I did a hostile amendment on the floor saying, give the people back their money now. You took it from them unnecessarily. and the rest of the programs that we're going to talk about, give it to them now. Why are we waiting a year? Is it coincidental? Is it coming up on an election cycle? Why wouldn't you give the people back their money that you've overtaken and now, and they didn't want to hear it?
So do you support the program, or do you think it's a gimmick, or would you have done the program aside from giving the money now as opposed to next year? Would you have done it differently?
I would have given it back much quicker, and then I also would have done real structural reform. On our taxes, we rate almost the highest in every category in the United States of America as overtaxed in almost every single category. So we proposed a real structural reform. Part of it would be tax rebates now, right away, give the people the money back that we should have never taken, and also an income tax cut. The income tax wages in New Jersey are not indexed like the federal level. So as inflation's been soaring over the last few years or few months, but also over the last 20 years, these income tax wage gaps have never been adjusted in New Jersey. So as people make more money, they're moved into a higher tax bracket, and they're not really making any due to inflation. So we wanted that, and that would have been real reform and long-term reform, and that many states have, and New Jersey has. Someone making $40,000 20 years ago isn't much different than they are now, and paying higher taxes, and their standard of living hasn't gone up at all. And I also wanted to, and my colleagues pushed to get rid of the marriage penalty tax. That's part of that. And, then energy tax receipts, which is another area, is supposed to be returned to the towns for tax relief. And they put in $75 million, called to something else, and then the towns don't have to use it dollar for dollar to reduce municipal property taxes. So, yes, I always in favor of giving taxpayers the money back, but there was much better ways. And this was a chance, rather than just one-shot gimmicks, this was a chance to really structurally reform New Jersey's overtaxed population.
Yeah. Do you think that will be something that you're able to accomplish next year?
I sure hope so. I mean, I think that the income tax cut that the Republicans have proposed is for the working class and the middle class. That's who it impacts the most. And my friends are always saying it on the other side of the aisle, we have to help out the working class, and this would have been a great time. Funding the school funding would have saved a lot of teachers' jobs, would have kept the kids intact. That wasn't fully funded.
The governor did announce the back to school sales tax holiday. Now that's going to run for 10 days, and it begins August 27th. So that's going to exempt some school supplies from sales tax. So can you talk a little bit about it?
It's a 10-day window to cut sales tax for kids going back to school on computers and pencils and pads. Again, I mean, a 10-day window I think is silly. I mean, parents budgeting, did they get the list of school supplies to require? I think it's another gimmick. If you were want a real reform and get people, do it for a month, do it for 2 months. And I was a small business owner, my wife and I, for over 20 years, and I can't even imagine the sales tax nightmare trying to figure out which products are taxed or what aren't. If you wanted to give real reform, that should have been a longer program. Again, I voted for it because I'm always going to vote for people getting their money back. But a 10-day window, I think it comes to $28 a family. If you have kids in school, I don't know, maybe you need like 100, 200,000 Ticonderoga pencils to make real difference. I mean, these are all short-term gimmicks instead of doing real reform. We had real money this time, and we could have done structural reform. But I would do a sales tax holiday much longer. Do it for a month. Do it permanent. Lower it to 6% permanently and give people their money back throughout the whole year. Was
it modeled after another state? I think Florida is about a week. New York does one as well, and it's about the same time frame.
I don't know where they pull some of this stuff out of. I think out of thin air. I mean, it seems to, a 10-day window, and when nobody knows what school supplies they need and families struggling, maybe they don't have the. I mean, it's a very short time. I don't think it's going to make much difference at all. I don't even know if a lot of taxpayers will be aware of this situation. They got this 10-day window to save. I mean, hey, I'm always for the $28, but it should have been a much longer period. And I think they just threw in like a marriage license, driver's license. These things are. If they're not gimmicks, then why are they only for 1 year?
So some of the other bullet points from the budget, there's a child tax credit anywhere from $100 to $500. So is this something that Republicans are behind?
I voted no on it, and actually to show you how bias, the issue I brought up, that they had a typo in the bill, that the bill isn't going to do any tax credits until 2024, and that wasn't intention. And I made a motion to table the bill to get the thing corrected, and it was pushed through anyway. It was meant for this tax year, and the way the bill is written, again, when things are done in haste, it's 2023, so nobody will see those tax credits. The way the bill passed both houses right now is to 2024, so it's a shame. Republicans have a lot of good ideas, and it's a shame that no matter what we say or do, they table it right away without thinking it through. And then I saw Governor Murphy did put a statement out saying, oh no, the tax bill was meant to be for tax year 2022. So, if they would have just given us a couple of minutes conversation and realized that they had passed the bill that was wrong, and we probably could have corrected it before we recessed for the summer. But they're always so anxious to table any idea or anything that the Republicans put forward.
Do you think that they could flip that around on you and say, well, we voted to at least give $100 to $500 back, and the Republicans said no because of the time frame?
I think a lot of Republicans did vote yes for it, and even glad at. But look at it. I voted no because it also goes to non-citizens. The illegal immigrants are going to get that, and I'm very principled on that. And I think these benefits should be for American citizens who are working legally and paying taxes. So that was my reason. I think there was only 2 of us who voted no.
So what do you say to your constituents who are coming to you and they're saying the taxes are too high, can't afford to live here, can't afford to retire here?
And vote Republican, get change, get control of a house. I mean, they have a complete monopoly. Governor Murphy's a good guy. I don't ever take any of this personally, but I've referred to him before as a one-man band or King Murphy. I mean, he gets what he wants, and he pushes it through, and that's the problem right now. We don't have checks and balances, and people say, that's the problem, and that there is one-party control.
We thank you so much, Assemblyman, for taking the time to talk to us about the budget this year, this year's budget today on the show. Thank you, Assemblyman.
Thanks for having me.
And that will do it for today. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.